Hey everybody, here is another video on quadratic word problems. Aside from the vertical motion problems, we do two main types of problems. Problems where we're trying to find the area and length of a rectangle, or the dimensions rather, and then problems where you're going to get a random formula that you've never seen before and you need to work with it. That sounds kind of challenging, but it's actually not that bad. Alright, so we start with the length of a rectangle is 6 inches more than its width, and the area of a rectangle is 91 square inches. So I want to figure out what length and width fits that bill. Now the first thing you're going to do is draw a rectangle. I don't care what you call the length and what you call the width. Maybe you've heard it matters, but for me it doesn't really matter. It's all going to work out to the same thing. We're going to start by calling our width x. It doesn't actually matter which one you use, but it's kind of easier to use x because then the length is 6 more than the width. So the length is just x plus 6. Okay, so we know the area is 91 square inches. Well, that's just width times length. So that allows us to write this equation, that the width, which is x, times the length equals 91. So we've got x times x plus 6 equals 91. We're going to distribute that, and that's going to give us x squared plus 6x equals 91. Now when I go to solve this type of equation, I can solve it however I want. I can use factoring, I can use the quadratic formula, I could even complete the square. But for problems that have smallish numbers, I'm going to try and use factoring because I think that's the easiest method. So we need to set it equal to 0. So move that 91 over to the other side. And then we're going to factor. So I need two things that multiply to negative 91 and add to 6. Those two things are 13 and negative 7. Now what that gives me for x is that x is negative 13 or x is positive 7. Now those actually aren't our dimensions. Only one of those is going to be one of our dimensions. I'm going to go back and I'm going to label my rectangle with x and x plus 6. I can't let x be negative 13 because if I do that, then this side, x here, is going to be negative, and we don't use negative side lengths in general to define rectangles. So we're going to have to say that x equals 7. If x equals 7, then x plus 6 would have to be 13. Not the negative 13 from before, but positive 13. And when I multiply those together, I'm going to find out that I have an area of 91. So my dimensions are 7 and 13. All right, so here's one for you to try on your own. I want you to pause the video, work through this, and see if you get the same answers I do. I will say that this particular one, because I had the number 165, I used the quadratic formula. All right, so give this one a try. All right, ready or not, here comes the answer. So I labeled x and x minus 4. The shorter one should be x minus 4. I multiplied that together and I got x squared minus 4x equals 165, and I got it down to x squared minus 4x minus 165 equals 0. Now, I plugged that into the quadratic formula and I got two answers, 15 and negative 11. For the same reason as before, we're going to throw out that negative 11 answer because it doesn't make sense in the context of the problem to have a negative side length. So my two dimensions are 15 and 11. And when I multiply those together, I get 165. Okay, here's another one for you to try. It's a little bit more challenging because the sides are a little bit more complicated. Give this one a try, and then I'll put the answer up and kind of talk about it in just a second. All right, here it comes. So I multiply the length and the width, and I get this. 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 110. When I subtract 110 from both sides, I get negative 112. And I'm looking at something so messy that I think to myself, this has got to be a quadratic formula problem. Okay? So I plug that in, and again, I get two answers. This time my answers are 7 and negative 16 divided by 3, which is negative 5.3 repeating. If I plug negative 5.3 repeating into this side, I'm going to get a negative side length, and again, that's a no-no. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in x equals 7 for my two sides. That's going to give me 3 times 7 plus 1, which is 22, and 7 minus 2, which is 5. When I multiply those together, I get 110. Okay, so x is 7, and my two side lengths are 22 and 5. Okay, the next set of problems, these are other word problems, where you're going to be given a random formula that you haven't seen before. Maybe it'll be a formula from a different math or science class, or maybe it'll just be kind of a random made-up formula. But these are actually the easiest problems because normally you just have to kind of work backwards. So here we go. A solar trough has a reflective parabolic surface that is used to collect solar energy. The graph of the function y equals 0.09x squared models the cross-section of the reflective surface where x is the length and y is the width. If the width is 5 meters, find the length. All right, I'll be honest with you, almost none of that matters. What really matters is that we were given that x is the length and y is the width. So if they tell us the width is 5, all that means is y equals 5. So I can go to my equation and I can plug in 5 for y. 5 equals 0.09x squared. I'm going to divide by 0.09, and that's going to give me 55.5 repeating as x squared. And then I'm going to take the square root. Now when I do that, I would normally get plus or minus about 7.45. But I'm talking about length and width here, and it doesn't make sense for me to have that negative answer. So my answer is just going to be 7.45 meters. Okay, just 2 more problems for us to do. Go ahead and read through this. I'm going to put the answer up in just a second. Okay, so the first thing I do is I plug in 3. Notice that it's negative y up here. So that's why this is negative 3, not positive 3. I'm going to divide by negative 0.25. That gives me 12. And that's what I get for x squared. So here's where I take the square root. And I'm going to get plus or minus 3.46. Again, the minus part doesn't matter because I can't have a negative length. So my answer is going to be 3.46. And that's the length in meters. All right, last one. So this is another geometry one, and you don't actually need to know any geometry in order to do this. It says the volume of a square prism with height of 10 is represented by the formula V equals 10 s squared, where s is the side length and v is the volume. The 10 in the formula is because of the 10 on the figure. What side length gives a volume of 2,250 cubic units? So that's the volume, and I want to know what side length does that for us. So I'm going to fill that into our formula. 2250 equals 10s squared. I'm going to divide by 10. I'm going to get 225 equals s squared. I'm going to take the square root of both sides and get plus or minus 15. And again, because we're talking about a solid figure here, I have to reject that negative 15, and my answer just has to be 15 units. All right, I hope that was helpful. We'll have plenty more time to talk about these. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks for watching.